Welcome to this podcast on the MARM framework, brought to you by the Hampshire Safeguarding Adults Board. The purpose of this podcast is to give you an introduction to the MARM framework. So let's start with, what does MARM stand for? It's an abbreviation for Multi-Agency Risk Management. So MARM is a simple acronym to describe the framework. The MARM framework is part of adult safeguarding work, and the framework sits within the Multi-Agency Adult Safeguarding Policy for Southampton, Hampshire, Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight. So the framework must support the overarching messages in relation to adult safeguarding. Those messages are about protecting an adult's right to live in safety, free from abuse and neglect. Safeguarding is also about people and organisations working together to prevent, to reduce or to minimise the risk to adults of abuse and neglect, whilst at the same time making sure that the adult is at the centre of that process. It's about ensuring that their well-being is promoted and including, where appropriate, having regard to the views, the wishes, the feelings and beliefs of that adult in deciding upon any action. The MARM framework is a framework to refer to when there are concerns about adults in relation to abuse and neglect, but where those concerns do not meet the statutory Section 42 inquiry duty. You will find a lot more information about adult safeguarding, your roles and responsibilities, access to the MARM framework and other supporting guidance documents on the Hampshire Safeguarding Adults Board website. Go to www.hampshiresab.org.uk. In order to understand where the MARM framework sits in relation to adult safeguarding, it's first important to understand the local authority statutory 42 inquiry duties, and also understand your responsibilities to report an adult safeguarding concern. The next slide will take us through what is meant by an adult safeguarding concern. A safeguarding concern can be raised by anybody. This is where there is reasonable cause to suspect that the adult has care and support needs, and there's reasonable cause to suspect that the adult is at risk of or experiencing abuse or neglect. The following slides provide an overview of what we mean by care and support needs, and also gives you an idea of some of the types or categories of abuse. The term care and support is the term used to describe the help some adults need in order that they can live their life in the best way they can, despite illness or disability they might have, or misuse of substances, drugs or alcohol. Although by no means an exhaustive list, care and support needs include help with things like getting out of bed, washing, dressing, and other elements of personal care needs, going to work, cooking or eating meals, seeing friends, caring for families, being part of the community. This might also include emotional support at times of difficulty and stress. There are many different types and categories of abuse and neglect, and sometimes it can be difficult to identify the signs, the signals or the indicators that give rise to a concern. The Care Act specifically names 10 types or categories, but you should be able to identify the different types of abuse and neglect and the signs and the indicators, so that you're in a position to be able to recognise what might constitute a safeguarding concern. Your multi-agency safeguarding procedures give you more information on types and categories of abuse, and there is a really good guide produced by the Social Care Institute of Excellence on types and categories of abuse and their indicators. Watch this clip produced by the 4 local safeguarding adults boards on recognising and raising safeguarding concerns.
Every adult has the right to be and feel safe. But sometimes people may experience harm, abuse, or neglect. We can all play a part in keeping adults safe, whether this is happening to us or someone else. Are you worried about something that's happening to you or to someone you know? Keeping adults safe is everyone's business. It's a team effort, working with the person in the centre being supported to work out what's important to them. Harm, abuse, or neglect can happen to anyone. It can be caused by people we know or by complete strangers. It can happen at home or away from home. What is harm, abuse, or neglect? It could be hurting someone, such as hitting, pushing, or locking someone in a room. Bullying, name-calling, or humiliating someone. Being touched when you don't want to be, or forced to take part in a sexual act. Taking, misusing, or keeping someone's money. Not providing the food, care, or medicine they need. Treating someone badly because of their age, gender, sexual orientation, physical disability, learning disability, or religious beliefs. When someone is neglecting their own needs. We need to work together and report any concerns. If you're worried about your own or someone else's well-being or safety, you can help by acting now. If you have concerns about someone, speak to them. If something's not right, tell them you want to help. They may want to talk to someone about what is happening to them, or they may want you to speak to someone on their behalf. Here's what to do. If there is immediate danger, or if you think a crime has been committed, call 999. If the concern is less urgent, call your local safeguarding team. They will ask you about the situation and why you're worried. Try to give as much information as possible. Information will be shared with others only when necessary. For example, if a crime has happened, we may need to tell the police. Your concerns will be looked into and taken seriously. We will work with the person to help keep them safe. We'll listen and involve them, giving them control and choice over what happens next. If you have concerns, tell somebody. You will be listened to, and help is available. Safeguarding is everyone's business. We all have a part to play in keeping adults safe. Thank you for playing yours.
The MALM framework is not a replacement for a response under Section 42 of the CARE Act, nor is it a replacement for approaches that you have within your own agency or organisation that would require you to work in a multi-agency way in relation to concerns around risk. So, for example, other kinds of multi-agency approaches like professionals meetings, multidisciplinary meetings, care programme approach, person-centred planning approaches, multi-agency risk assessment conferences in relation to domestic abuse and violence. These are all part of your own agencies and organisations' business as usual practices. The MALM framework is a framework specifically in relation to those adults that meet the criteria and are experiencing an unmanageable level of risk. So who can hold a MALM meeting? Any agency or organisation can hold a MALM meeting if they have reasonable cause to believe that the adult they are working with meets the criteria for the MALM framework to support a multi-agency approach to working with the adult in relation to concerns around unmanageable risk. The framework is a multi-agency framework that's part of adult safeguarding work that's been developed by the 4 local safeguarding adults boards in Hampshire, Portsmouth, Southampton and the Isle of Wight. It's a framework that can be utilised by any safeguarding adult board partners in the private, the voluntary or the statutory sectors. The MARM framework sits largely outside of the Section 42 inquiry duty. It's a framework to support multi-agency working when an organisation or agency is working with an adult who is at risk of or experiencing an unmanageable level of risk as a result of circumstances which create risk of significant harm to themselves or others, but is not related to abuse or neglect by a third party. The MARM framework should only be a framework used to support adults who have the mental capacity to understand the risks posed to themselves and others. This slide highlights some of the criteria for the use of the MARM framework, and in particular includes where there are concerns around unmanageable risk in relation to adults who may be self-neglecting or hoarding. This particular safeguarding approach brings together the adult, their family, friends, their advocates, those working with them across sectors to identify risks, develop ways of working with those risks to prevent, to minimise the risk of harm to themselves or others. In the MARM framework of June 2020, you will find the MARM criteria, which we outlined in the previous slide. Professional judgment will determine whether or not the level of risk has reached an unmanageable level for the organisation. The purpose of the MARM framework is to ensure timely information sharing between agencies, to gain a better understanding of the presenting risks, and to work with the adult to develop a shared risk management plan. Any risk assessment should be person-centred and strength-based, and aims to make clear what the risks are, the likelihood of them occurring, and the impact upon the adult and others. The risk management plan should be proportionate, enabling and empowering, and specify the who, the what, the where, the when and the how to reduce or to minimise or eliminate the risks identified. The MARM framework reinforces the importance of professionals working in partnership with the adult and with each other. It requires a commitment to longer-term solution-based approaches, which has at its core a focus on building trust and rapport with the adult. The framework aims to provide an effective and coordinated multi-agency response to those critical few individuals that are experiencing an unmanageable level of risk. It is important at the outset to seek consent from the adult about holding a MARM meeting. This means that you should be involving the adult, discussing with them the reasons for calling a MARM meeting, talking to them about their involvement and how to maximise their participation. However, it does not mean that a MARM meeting cannot be held if you do not have the adult's consent. So whilst consent should be sought wherever reasonably possible, this does not necessarily mean that the meeting cannot go ahead. However, any decision not to seek consent or to override the adult's consent must have a basis in law and be clearly recorded. Let's move on now to the involvement of the adult themselves in the MARM meeting. The adult should be at the centre of the MARM process as a whole and be involved in all discussions about the risks and involved in discussions around the MARM meeting and be supported to attend that meeting. So MARM meetings can only be held with an adult who has capacity to make decisions about the risk and understand the options and choices available to them. Understanding a person's capacity to make a decision is a vital element in planning with an adult. Where it has been assessed that the adult lacks capacity to make decisions in relation to the nature and the degree of risks, then the MARM framework is not applicable, and any approaches must be in accordance with the Mental Capacity Act and the principles of best interest decision making, and where appropriate, best interest decision making meetings held instead. Let's move on now to think about support to the adult through advocacy. This is a very important role, and discussions should be had with the adult as soon as possible to decide whether or not there is a need for advocacy, whether they have family or friends that could undertake that role. Equally, it's important to understand that the local authority does have a statutory duty to provide access to independent advocacy if the legal criteria is met. So if you think there is a need for advocacy, and where possible you've discussed this with the adult themselves, do support the adult to make a request for advocacy through to adult social care. So any agency or organisation can call a MARM meeting. You should have identified individuals within your own agency or organisation that have the necessary skills and knowledge to be able to undertake the role of the MARM chair. Who could chair a MARM meeting should be determined within your own agency and organisation. More detail about the role of the chair can be found in the MARM framework. But this slide reflects some of the key roles and responsibilities of any chair of a MARM meeting. Additional tools and templates to support the MARM framework and to support the chair can be found on the Hampshire Safeguarding Adults Board website. You may be asked to attend a MARM meeting. You might be asked to provide a report in advance of the meeting. This report should include information regarding your agency's or organisation's involvement with the adult, any relevant risk assessment information, the views and wishes of the adult and outcomes that are important to them, any involvement from other agencies, whether that be currently or in the past, and you might be asked to produce a chronology. If you're currently working with the adult, it's important wherever possible that you share and discuss your report with them in advance. Talk through with them their involvement and participation in that meeting and any support that they might need to enable them to attend and or to contribute to that meeting, including whether the person has any need for advocacy. The outcomes of a MARM meeting should be the formulation of an agreed risk management plan, which identifies both the needs and wishes of the adult, their desired outcomes, the roles and responsibilities of partner agencies and organisations, and this plan should clearly reflect how partner agencies will work with the adult to look at effective ways of managing or minimising those risks. An essential outcome of a successful MARM meeting will be the clarification of expectations about what each agency can or cannot do. It is expected that each agency and organisation will be clear about how they're going to fulfil their roles and responsibilities, and that is clearly understood by the adult as well as by participating agencies and organisations. There should be a clear record made of the key points discussed, and the outcome should be a clear risk management plan which is shared with the adult and those who have a role to play. It may be necessary for a subsequent MARM meeting, known as a MARM review meeting, to be called to review the actions and the outcomes in relation to the risk management plan. The MARM framework is not a replacement for a Section 42 inquiry. If the Section 42 inquiry duty is met, then the local authority must undertake whatever inquiries it thinks necessary under the Care Act to establish what action needs to be taken, if any, to protect and support that adult. The MARM framework is a framework that should only be applied in relation to high-risk, unmanageable risk situations, in relation to adults who have capacity to make decisions about the risks. The framework is not a framework for concerns that can be managed through alternative risk management processes. So for other kinds of risk concerns that are not identified as unmanageable, then business as usual risk management processes should be followed. The MARM framework is not a framework for agencies to use to pass the buck or indeed focus on how they protect themselves from blame, it is not a framework for professionals to decide what is best for the adult. This slide is a reminder of the MARM criteria. However, if as an agency or organisation you're unsure as to whether or not a person that you are working with would meet the MARM criteria, then use the Safeguarding Professional helpline number so that you can talk through your concerns. The helpline number is 01962 847 214. This number is not to make a referral, and if you do have a safeguarding concern, then please raise your safeguarding concern on the number that you'll find on the following slide. Adult abuse is never acceptable. If you know someone is at risk of or being abused or neglected, or is experiencing some form of abuse and neglect, tell someone. Don't assume that somebody else is doing something about the situation. Don't ignore it. If you see something, say something and report it. I hope this introduction to the multi-agency risk management framework has been helpful to you. But please do refer to the MARM framework that can be found on the Hampshire Safeguarding Adults Board website, www.hampshiresab.org.uk. My name is Jane Hughes. Thank you for taking the time to listen.